This is part two of how a target victim lost $1 million to a romance scammer calling himself George, who she came to know as Samuel. Part two, the confession, the romance, and was my future in Africa. By this time, I had invested so much into this relationship, my time, my money, and I was leaving my old life behind. George told me that he had not been honest with me, though. He said that he thought I wouldn't love him if I knew the truth. I thought he was going to tell me he was married, and in my heart I felt like those were the words that were going to come from his mouth. Instead, George told me that he wasn't honest with me about himself. By this time, I'm thinking that in reality he's a balding, overweight man, something minor, something cosmetic. I told George, I don't care. I love you. I want a life with you. I was drawn to him and I would do anything for him. George replied to me with that he knew that he made this all happen. And I was very confused at this point. I didn't know what he meant or what was going on. George asked me what I knew about spells, oath, and magic. I told him nothing. And what was the point of this? What does this have to do with the situation at hand? He told me he found my profile and cast a spell to make me fall in love with him and do whatever he says. I laughed and thought he was being playful and it was a bunch of hocus pocus. I told him to stop playing around, and what were you dishonest about? This is when George told me his real name is Samuel. I thought, okay, so you lied about your name. He said, not exactly just my name. He told me that he had cast a spell on me at first to make me fall in love with him for financial gain. But over time he fell in love with me and continued the lies, but wanted to confess and see if I really loved him. But he said things got out of hand. I asked him who he was, and he said his real name was Samuel and he lives in Nigeria. He asked if I would consider still being with him. I had to absorb this, and I think one of the first things I asked him was if he was really injured and in the securities industry. Samuel told me no. He was living in Nigeria, and he was trying to scam me for a couple of gift cards, but during the whole process, he fell in love with me, and that he really wanted to be with me, and that he wanted me to know the real him, and that I did so much for him, including leaving my husband, that he knew that I really loved him. He told me that he was into spell casting and black magic, and he knew how to manipulate people, and he openly admitted it. He told me that even now, as I'm unsure if I will be with him, that he knows I will be. I hung up the phone with him, and I spent the next few hours, from what I can recall, sitting in silence, thinking about my life and what it had become. Here was a man who I thought was George. I had his photos. I sent him extremely graphic photos of myself and videos. I had sold nearly every piece of jewelry and personal effect that I had owned. I divorced my husband, leaving my life behind for Florida, and spent countless hours and tens of thousands of dollars on a life that he sold me. That was a lie. George messaged me and told me to call him when I'm ready to talk. It was such an odd interaction. It wasn't him begging, but him telling me to call him when I'm ready, as if he knew I would call him or come running back to him. It made me question everything. Who was Mark that I was loading parts of my paychecks into his account? Who were the people I sent money to? What's the story, and who really is George/Samuel? He was right, though. I couldn't stop thinking of him, and I called him. He answered and asked me if I was ready to know the whole truth. I told him I have more questions than anything, and he told me he was here to make everything crystal clear. He told me again that his name was Samuel, and he was 48 years old and lived in Nigeria, specifically Ibadan. That he started this online chatting to talk to women a few years ago, but he would block them after he would receive a little bit of money or gift cards. But he told me that he felt this instant connection with me. He told me he was unmarried with no kids. I hit the video call button, and this time he answered. He told me that he thought I wouldn't want to be with him when I knew the truth, and that from the beginning he had cast a love and control spell over me. I scoffed at this nonsense, but then Samuel showed me on video this altar that he had with candles and other strange items. He said he built this altar for me to obtain my love. He said I was different than the other women he had talked to in the past, and that I filled his heart with happiness, and he didn't want to lose me ever. He told me that he knew a woman like me wouldn't want a man like him from Nigeria. I told Samuel that skin color, age, none of that mattered, but honesty did, and that he had scammed me, and I wanted to know who this Mark person was. He explained to me that Mark was someone who works for him in a way, collecting money, and that he would give him a cut of the money. I asked him how many women he scammed, and he told me a few, but the money was used to help build his home, pay for food and medicine for his sick mother and other family members. He told me he had 2 sisters and a brother, and that his brother was very sick, so he used a lot of the money to help him, that his brother had had malaria a few years ago and suffered from it and continues to have health issues due to the malaria. I was totally unsure how much of this was genuine or what was happening. Samuel showed me on camera his home, which looked to be a small concrete building with a metal door and fence. He said he took care of his aging sick mother. When I asked him about his daughter, he told me that as George, he told me that there was a daughter, but there was no daughter, and he had emailed me pretending to be his daughter. I asked him why me, of all people, he confessed to, and he told me it was because he made a love oath for us to be together forever. He had to confess because he was running out of stories and excuses not to meet. He told me he wanted to be with me and for me to know him as his true self. I think I was still in a daze at this point and didn't know what to say entirely to this whole situation. He told me that he was totally and fully in love with me, and he would show me and prove himself. He and I video chatted for a while, and honestly, he's not a bad-looking man. He was not the George I knew, but his personality was the same. He made me laugh, and he was genuine with his words and feelings, or at least I felt he was. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt so drawn to this man. Despite his lies and his manipulation, I still loved George, or Samuel, as I now know him as. I told Samuel that I'd need time to process everything, but my heart still felt the same. He told me he knew this, and he knew we would be together. I took a few days before reaching out again to Samuel. I found myself dreaming of him, of learning who the man was behind these romantic stories. I found myself searching about the town he lives in. I can't explain what made me so compelled when any normal person would block or even go to the police. I video called Samuel again. He asked me when my divorce would be finished, and I told him I'm in the process and it started, but it takes time as the courts require a 6-month cooling off period before a court date would be given to ensure divorce is what we want. My husband was at this point asking for the house, his car, and all of our investments and everything inside the home. I would be lucky if I walked away with the clothes on my back and my car. And I explained this to Samuel, and he said that he wanted to marry me and be with me. Behind all the facade, he really, I think, loved me. He told me he wanted me to come to Nigeria to meet him. The same as when George was in Florida, except this would be for real. We started this online relationship as himself, as before, but this time he was being honest. We would video chat before work and late at night. We would spend hours together online. He closed his George profile online and added me with his real profile, which didn't have a whole lot on it, and it looked fairly new. He told me the Nigerian government closes people's profiles at random, so he always had to create a new one with himself. He tagged me as in a relationship with him through social media. This caused some distant family members of mine who noticed this to contact me asking what was going on. Samuel said he didn't care who knew and he wanted the world to know how much he loved me. I had to explain to some cousins and family that my husband and I were going through divorce proceedings. We had grown apart and it was time for us to end our marriage. They questioned who this man was, this Samuel. I told him he's a close friend who is getting me through things, and I felt safer with him having him around and in a relationship with me. I told him how abusive my husband finally was, and spilled the beans on years of verbal abuse, sometimes physical. Samuel was very attentive. He would shower me with affection, and he cared. He was upset with me that I quit putting money into Mark's account. I told Samuel I would consider visiting him in Nigeria, but in order to do so, I would need that money back that I put in Mark's account. Samuel told me he wouldn't be able to do that as he used the money to pay for his brother's medical care and the medical care of his mother. So the money I had been hiding from my husband was now also used, and I had nothing to fall back on when my divorce was through. I told Samuel that he was ruining my life. What was I supposed to do when the divorce is over? Samuel told me that I should sell everything and move to Nigeria and marry him. He said he was looking at some land outside of his town that was for sale and building a home on the land. We could spend our days together. And I told him I have to work. I just can't leave the country and move to Nigeria. He told me that I should visit and kept pushing me to come visit. The land that was for sale was only $150,000 US, and that included the materials to build the home. Samuel told me if I could get part of the money, he could buy the land and then the materials. I told him, I don't have that kind of money. I'm struggling to pay my room rent, and I'm renting a room from a friend to stay afloat during the attorney and divorce fees that are compiling. Samuel told me that I could have a beautiful life with him in Nigeria, and to think about it, and that he knew I would come through and give him and us the life we deserved. When I questioned him on what he did for work, he told me that Nigeria has no jobs for people, but he made a little money working as a spellcaster, and that he wrote and created spells for people who had difficulty in love. His specialty was love spells. When I asked him how much he makes doing this, he told me very little, only a few naira here and there. When I told him if he's a spellcaster, he should cast one to become rich. He told me it doesn't work that way, and his specialty is romance and love, and that he knows that I, deep down, love him and will build a life with him. He started filling me with this fantasy of living with him in Nigeria, how beautiful it would be, and sent me pictures of this land that he wanted to buy us. Showed me photos of the house, the type of house he'd want built, and all the materials. The land, the water, everything. He told me we could live off the land. He could build a website for his spellcasting, and I could find a job working online from home, and we could have everything we dreamed of. While the thoughts were not so far-fetched, I knew absolutely nothing about Nigeria, nothing about the culture, and I told Samuel he would have to educate me on life in Nigeria, the customs, and how would I even get there? How does the visa process work? He told me we would have to marry, and he would make me his queen, and we could live in a smaller village where people would just love me. At this point in my life, I really had nothing to lose, but I also had health issues and concerns. What about medical care in Nigeria? What was life like for an American there? My thoughts consumed me because I really did love this man. Samuel video chatted with me more, asking me if I thought about moving there. He said he was being honest now and told me we could start a business from Nigeria. We could have a great life. Since his confession, it had been 4 months. I learned to work through forgiving him for lying. I still love this man, and every day he filled my life with love and tenderness. He was in my every thought. He was very attentive. It was about 2 months before the cooling off period of my divorce, and I'd have to go to court for my hearing. My husband was contesting the divorce and asking for everything. Between paying my attorney and trying to save money and recover from all the money I lost, I was working full-time at my job, and I'd also taken a weekend job doing some caregiving, babysitting, you name it, I was doing it for extra cash. I even helped a friend at the car wash that she managed, picking up evening shifts, helping to maintain the car wash bays, take out the trash, vacuum stations, etc. I was exhausted, but still in love. And Samuel didn't ask for loads of money. Yes, I sent him some to help with everyday living and food, and helped keep his phone going, but he was also doing his side work as a spellcaster. I learned more about his culture and his life of spellcasting. He said his father was a spellcaster as well as his grandfather, so it was handed down to him in his blood. He was destined to do this. Meanwhile, my attorney fees are growing by the day, and we were requesting half of everything be split between my husband and I. My ultimate plan was to have the divorce settled, fly over to Nigeria to meet Samuel, see how things were in person. If the love was there in person, I was going to fly home, sell my car and other things, and move to Nigeria to marry him. He proposed to me on video chat, and I accepted his proposal. During our video chats, there was never any indication he lied. He was always by himself when he video chatted me. Nothing gave me red flags. He promised me he was not chatting to anyone else, and I believed him, as he always answered my calls and he always called me at various times. It's not like he would only call me at night or only during certain times. I was available to him and he was available to me 24/7. When I called, he would always pick up. There was never anything strange or alarming. Samuel told me that the land was still for sale and would keep telling me he wanted to buy it and make our dream home on the land. I told Samuel, well, when I visit, we can look at land, and maybe in a few years we'll have land, but I need to get through my divorce and get everything situated. The weeks went on and it came time to start prepping for my court date. My husband's attorney came back with, instead of contesting the divorce and financials, he asked if we could settle with me obtaining a 60-40 settlement. My husband gets 60 and I get 40. My husband apparently had a buyer interested in the home and wanted to sell the home while the market was hot. He wanted to settle everything. By this time I suspect that my husband had a girlfriend, as he made comment through mutual friends he was transferring his job to Arizona, where he had a friend that he wanted to move in with. They told me the friend was a female. My attorney told me at this point it would be wise to accept the offer and we could settle the divorce and both parties can just move on. The cost of the attorney was more than I wanted to continue with, and we drafted the agreement that we would settle everything. It finally mentally had gotten to me. The divorce was happening. The home we made would be sold. Finances, investment, bank accounts, savings, things we worked hard for all these decades would be divided. And while I was losing a lot, I wasn't losing everything. I think at this time I was mourning the loss of my past, my marriage, and what went wrong all those years ago. On the other hand, I had Samuel waiting for me, telling me everything would be okay. He gave and showed me the beautiful side of life and my future. So while I was closing a door on one part of my life, I was opening another. That door looked so bright looking from the outside in. While I cried over the past, Samuel kept my head in the future. When I told him about the divorce settlement, Samuel sent me photo after photo of this beautiful land he wanted us to buy. He asked me how much I would get in total for the divorce and selling off the house and assets. I told him it was very likely after taxes, fees, and paid everything off and it was settled, I could potentially walk away with around $400,000 to $450,000. This was including the sale of the home, all of our investments, assets, literally everything we shared. We had purchased our home for $189,000 over 20 years ago. The house itself was worth more now, but being sold at a fair price. My husband would get 60% and me 40%, but it was still leaving me financially sound and walking out of the marriage with enough rather than nothing. Samuel insisted that we purchase the land and he start having the builders begin. He wanted me to get the money to sell everything, just come over and marry him. Don't look back, he kept telling me. I told him it would take a while for everything to settle, that the money is not instantaneous. Samuel told me that he was going to talk to the landowner to see what it would take to reserve the land. He said if he told the landowner that the potential buyer is an American, they'd likely hold it for us. Samuel told the landowner that his wife is American and to please hold the land until we have all the money. He said the landowner was in agreement to wait, but there would be $1,000 holding fee to ensure we were serious. To me, this made sense, sort of when you put good faith money into a home you're interested in buying. Samuel told me that I would need to transfer the landowner $1,000, and I did so via bank transfer to this landowner. In return, Samuel showed me a document claiming that the land is being held until full payment would be made and that the landowner gave us 4 months to make the rest of the payment. The total amount would be the building materials and land purchase around $300,000 US. This was for everything and to pay the builders. Samuel insisted we would live like kings and he would have everything we needed. It was in my mind that everything was falling into place. The divorce would be final, my soon-to-be ex-husband agreed to settle, and I would have the money I needed to start a new life with Samuel. Samuel started the process of getting me to Nigeria with regards to the marriage certificate and residency visa. He talked to a government office near his home, and they told him it would be $500 US to start the application. Now, I had not settled and received my money from the divorce. Everything was still being processed, and I told Samuel, I don't have the money yet. What I had, though, was my paycheck from work, and I just paid my room rent. He told me the application must start being processed as the government works very slow here. So I ended up taking a cash advance on my credit card. Samuel had me bank transfer the money to a government agent in Lagos who would be processing my application. Along with that, Samuel had me message him a copy of my passport, driver's license, social security card, and personal information like my birth certificate so they can process my application. I knew nothing about the process, but I did, however, start my vaccination process with my doctor that was costing a lot of money. I charged that as well on my credit card, and it took me a few months before I finally received my payout from the divorce and everything was finalized. I told Samuel the news, and he was elated. He said he bought some of the building supplies on credit, but now we need to buy the land and finish the payment. Samuel kept asking me when I would be making the payment as the landowner is getting nervous. Samuel told me my visa was being processed and it would take another month before approval. I did tell some distant family members what I planned on doing, and honestly, I lost a lot of family when they found out I was moving to Nigeria. Some of my family said I was crazy and urged me to visit first, and some families said I was insane for even entertaining the idea. The plan at first was to visit, but after everything happened, I didn't want to waste time. I had already wasted years since first meeting this love of my life. Samuel told me that I would have to bank transfer the money to the landowner's bank account, but I would have to make small transfers, as not to transfer all the money at once as it would raise red flags with the landowner's bank. I stared at my online bank account with all this money. Samuel was on video chat with me when I did the transfers to make sure they were done correctly. I started the process and would transfer the money a little at a time. The entire process took about 3 weeks, showing Samuel the transfer information each time. During this process, Samuel kept telling me how much he loved me. He would show me parcel ownership in both his and my name together. I felt like my dream was coming true. Samuel showed me photos of the building materials, the building land and clearing, and the photos of the model home he was having built, what it would look like, and he even had me pick out the colors of the tiles and the walls. He kept calling me his wife, teaching me customs and the ways of Nigeria, what I would need, and the reality of what it was like there. I awaited my visa and started looking for flights. Samuel told me that he would take care of it though, asking me where the nearest airport is from my house, and he would book everything for me. He told me there was a little left over from the building supply costs, so he said that he would use that money to buy my flight ticket. He sent me my visa through email, telling me that the government let him know that I've been approved, and we made plans for me to fly out in a little over a month. He informed me the government needs to see that I have a Nigerian bank account, though, to show I plan on staying and can support myself in Nigeria until I can find work and start an online business. Samuel told me that he could open a bank account in both our names, so it showed that I planned on staying there. He sent me my flight information, which had me going from here to London to Istanbul and then on to Lagos. Once in Lagos, he would meet me at the airport and we would have a private driver take us to his town. The home we were building wouldn't be complete for a few more weeks after my arrival. I ended up putting my car up for sale, but I had no buyers. Samuel suggested I sell it to one of those car buying sites, and I ended up doing just that. I sold my car for $19,000, which was a little less than I wanted, but it was quick and easy. The money was in my bank account within days. Samuel told me to transfer the money to our new joint account and gave me the routing and account number. It was a Nigerian bank. I went ahead and transferred that money along with the remainder of the money that was in my account and closed out my American bank account and kept a little bit of cash on hand. I used what cash I had on hand to pay off any credit cards, pay up any due rent, and then started selling whatever wouldn't fit into my suitcases. My now ex-husband never contacted me after the divorce. His last words we had in court, to which he said he was happy it was all over. I had my life down to a couple of suitcases and would work until a week before I was set to leave for Nigeria. During this time I sold everything I could. I had some cash and I would keep it as I would need that during my travels. Samuel insisted that I wire the money to the bank account in Nigeria, but I explained to him that I no longer have my American bank account, so I can't transfer money anymore. He suggested I put in for a chain wallet virtual currency, as abroad it's hard to use cash, especially American money. I didn't want to do it as the cash on hand wasn't much. I told him I'll be there soon. I need the cash for food and little incidentals like my medication, as I was stockpiling my meds and other things I would need. Samuel kept telling me how much he loved me, how the home was coming along, and he was looking into starting an online spellcasting business and school, and asked me if I found any online jobs I can do when I'm there. I told him I was looking into different options, but also knew I could pull my 401k retirement early if I needed to, as I was unsure what type of job I'd be able to find there. The ultimate plan was for him to run his business and for me to enjoy being kind of retired, maybe help with his website and booking clients, things like that. I had my visa printed, my flight information, and everything was ready to go. As the days got closer, I was receiving photos and videos of this land. I then received a phone call from my ex-husband. He had moved to Arizona, and yes, he was with a woman that he had known through work. She had moved to Arizona, and he followed. He confessed to me that he'd been having an affair for a number of years and wanted to confess that he'd had several affairs through the entire length of our marriage. At this point, I was blissfully happy with Samuel. I didn't even care. I called him some names, but told him it's over and asked why he's calling me, why he's even bothering. He told me upon moving he was missing a couple of his sports memorabilia cards and asked me if I'd seen them. I told him that since we were confessing, I told him that I sold them and gave the money to my boyfriend, who will now be my new husband. I said this to hurt him, to get my digs in after he told me about all of his affairs. I thought he'd forgive and forget. Instead, he started screaming at me, telling me that he was recording me and going to sue me for the cost of the cards, and he would make sure I had a lawsuit filed against me if I didn't pay him the money that I got for the cards. I knew this would affect me leaving the country, especially having a lawsuit against me. and my ex-husband told me the cards were worth at least $7,000. I argued with him and told him I only got $3,000 for them. He called me names and told me to pay him the $3,000 then, or he would call the police for theft, and it would be over $1,000 of theft, and then he would sue me. This scared me, as I couldn't have any criminal record. I wanted nothing to stop me from getting married to Samuel. I felt trapped, even blackmailed to an extent. I ended up wiring my ex-husband the money just to stop him from coming after me for his stolen cards. This left me with less. In fact, it left me with very little money. I told Samuel what happened, and Samuel became angry, accusing me of cheating on him with my ex-husband. I explained to him that my ex doesn't even live in the state, he has a new girlfriend, and he was making threats to file a police report for theft and sue me, and possibly that could affect my visa status or marriage license in the Nigerian government eyes. Samuel laughed at me, told me I was a stupid, foolish woman. He said he couldn't be with a woman who lied and cheated with my ex. I cried and begged him, telling him I never cheated. I told him when I fly out, he will see that I am real and genuine with my love and faithfulness to only him. Samuel laughed and then hung up. About an hour later, he messaged me after refusing my calls, telling me he canceled the flight, visa, and marriage application, that he couldn't forgive me for talking to my ex, and he told me he would be blocking me. I called Samuel over and over, begging him to talk to me. Samuel told me he broke the oath and cursed me for my infidelity. I told him I was not cheating on him. He told me he was stupid for being with me, and then when I told him to stop building the home then and send my money back. Samuel, while on the phone, laughed. It was an evil, almost demonic laugh, and he told me I was an old fool. He hung up and blocked my number, blocked me from social media, and totally blocked me out. I was distraught and I didn't know what to do. I tried calling him over and over directly, not through the app as we chatted on, but my phone would just ring through and stop. I continued to try with nothing, no luck. He blocked me from social media. I created another profile and searched his name. Well, I found several profiles with his name, which was really common in Nigeria. I finally found the profile he friended me with. It was the same profile picture. I clicked the profile and went to send him a message, but found the profile to be slightly different. While it was the same profile picture, it was a different profile. His name and his profile picture were the same, but his profile had thousands of friends. The profile I chatted to him on only had a handful. I sent him a message telling him to call me, that I wasn't cheating. The message was unread, so I tried calling him on Messenger. He picked up and asked what I was doing, if I was crazy, and he told me to never contact him again or he would have me arrested. I told him that I was calling the police as he had stolen my money. Well, he hung up and blocked me. I made yet another profile and found the same profile and then the one he talked to me on. I messaged both and then browsed the profile that I hadn't seen before with the thousands of friends. His album, at least some of them were open. They showed him with candles, skulls, and all sorts of odd magic stuff. One had a photo of him with a different phone number offering spells. I copied the number and kept scrolling. He had an album with him and another woman. She wasn't Nigerian, but looked American maybe, or European. He marked the photo as his spiritual wife, and then in other photos his wife. She was older, maybe in her 60s, maybe early 70s. One photo I came across had him and her together in what looked like a car, and one on a farm of some kind. These photos were months old. They were not years old or someone from his past. I couldn't find this woman on his friends list, or if she was there were so many friends I couldn't find her. She had short red hair, and as I stated, she looked American or maybe European. So he was talking to me while talking to this other woman, or married to this woman? I ended up calling the number on his spellcasting photo, and it rang a few times, and then I received an SMS from the number asking who this is. I gave him my name and told Samuel to stop playing games. I was going to the police. He told me he placed a curse on me, and if I contacted him again, I would not like the curse. I told him I'm already penniless and heartbroken, and I'll call the police. He, I think, blocked my number as the rest of my messages would go unsent. I called the police and was told to come to the police station and file a report. I went to the police with all of my messages, my information, his information. I've included some of this for you to review as well. The police told me that it's very likely I was scammed and suggested I contact the FBI Cybercrime Unit. I told them I was going to Nigeria to find them, and they advised me not to. They suggested strongly that I just work with the FBI. I filed an online cybercrime report and only received a case number. I found the Nigerian Police Investigations version of the EFCC and contacted them via their official website. They finally got back to me a few days later asking for more information on Samuel. I gave them everything I had. I then bought a cheap prepaid phone and called Samuel's numbers. He did answer, and I told him that I had the EFCC after him and to give me my money back. Samuel laughed again, telling me I was an old fool and that I knew nothing about him, and he started to babble some words to me, telling me I would be cursed for the rest of my life. I was totally shattered and destroyed financially. I was lucky enough to have the room rental, so I was not homeless, but I was without a car, no savings, no bank account, and totally broke. I was so desperate I went as far as to call my ex-husband to ask him for a loan so I could get a used car, and he laughed at me and blocked my number. I totally lost it mentally, and looking back during this so-called relationship, I became obsessed with finding the woman in the photos that she had with him, and finally did find her. She was a woman from Belgium who lived in Lagos with Samuel, but was from her profile looked to be back in Belgium. I messaged her through social media asking her to call me on Messenger or message me back regarding Samuel. It took her a couple days, but she did message me asking who I was and what I wanted. I told her my story, and she and I ended up exchanging numbers. I ended up buying an international calling card and calling this woman. She told me she met Samuel a few years ago online as himself, fell in love, and visited him in Nigeria. They fell deeply in love, and they had a marriage ceremony in Nigeria. She sold her home in Belgium and moved to him after her visa was approved, but his visa was denied to come to Belgium. With no other choice, she moved with him and lived in Nigeria. He was loving, caring, and spent her money. She said she felt like she was under a spell. She'd never traveled abroad before and found herself selling everything she owned and moving to Nigeria. She said Samuel spent her money, and when the money ran low, he became physically and mentally abusive. She said they had an argument when she caught him chatting online to other women. She said Samuel told her that he was working online doing computer work and helping customers with his spell casting and all the software and computer repair via online web and chat. It turns out he was a romance scammer scamming women. She found tons of women who were sending him cash. She said she called her adult son in Belgium who brought her back home after she ended up broke and was scared. This was during the time he was romancing me. Samuel cleaned out all of her money from her bank and savings and spent what money she had brought with her. When I inquired about if he was building and buying land, she said no, that not that she was aware of, but he did transfer a lot of money to his so-called ex-wife and children. She found out that he was still technically married and had 4 kids. Oh, and he's also 32 years old, not the age he told me. Literally, his confession was all a lie. It was insane. She and I spoke for over an hour until my prepaid calling card was near the end of its minutes. She asked me if we could be friends on social media, and we began sharing stories, comparing lies, and that's when she told me she contacted the EFCC after she got home to Belgium. They were investigating him for being a romance scammer and a fraudster. When I asked her if she felt that he put a curse or spell on her, she said she was a sane, clear-thinking woman until she met Samuel online. After that, it was like she lost her mental clarity. We both think we were under some sort of spell. I contacted the EFCC again and informed them that Samuel was victimizing others, and they were already investigating him. I started a new job, saved for a used car, and kept in touch with Samuel's victim from Belgium. The EFCC never contacted either of us regarding their investigations. We remained friends and remained hopeful he would be brought to justice, but he wasn't, as of me sharing this story with you. Who knows? Maybe he will someday, or he will scam someone of higher prestige and power and be caught. As for myself, I ended up in therapy to work through everything, including the abusive marriage that didn't help, and I felt led into this relationship. I also went to a spiritual healer who told me I had dark attachments to me which she had to clear. Who really knows, but I felt more clear-headed and in a better place after seeing this spiritual healer. That's my story. Whether you believe in spellcasters or not, please know at least I know romance scammers are real, they're cruel, and they don't care about anything but the money. We'd like to thank this lady for sharing her story. I know that this is a little bit different than our normal romance scam stories, and as I said in my first video when we covered this story, this does happen often, and people do move to other countries to be with someone, and it ends up being a romance scammer, or they end up getting caught in a bad situation. If you'd like to share your encounter with an online romance scammer, you can find us scammingscammers@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook right now under the page Scamming Cyber Education. Our inbox is there. We're happy to hear your story. Please include any screenshots or information so we can verify your story, and we will narrate it into a video. Until next time, everybody stay safe. And above all, don't give money or gift cards to anyone, whether you believe in spellcasting and voodoo or you don't. At the end of the day, don't give your money. Stay safe.